Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take really dense source material, the regulations, the white papers, all that high-level research, and we boil it down fast, giving you just the essential knowledge you need.
Exactly, straight to the point.
And today, our mission, it's focused squarely on the European Union's NIS2 directive. This thing is, it's a game changer, a really packed regulation that fundamentally rewrites the rule book for managed service providers, MSPs, and honestly, their entire client base, too.
It really does. And today we're cutting right to the core of it. Our goal is to unpack what NIS2 actually demands, help you grasp the new kind of high-stakes accountability it puts on executives,
Right.
and maybe most importantly, reveal why the really forward-thinking MSPs, they're already seeing this not just as a huge compliance headache, but as a major engine for business growth.
Okay, let's start right there, the foundation. When we say NIS2, what exactly are we talking about? Lay it out for us.
Sure. So NIS2, it stands for the EU Network and Information Systems Directive. It's a big update to the original one from back in 2016. Think of it as Europe's ambitious strategy to really boost cybersecurity resilience across the entire bloc, collectively.
Right, collective resilience.
Yeah. It sets these non-negotiable minimum standards for security, for risk management, and critically, for mandatory incident reporting.
Mandatory reporting, okay. And who's this for?
It targets what they call essential and important entities, basically critical infrastructure providers, the organizations whose failure could cause widespread economic or societal disruption.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit, because before we even get into the scary stuff, like the massive fines you hear about, who exactly is caught up in this new mandate? The old NIS directive seemed, narrower. This feels much bigger, like a dragnet almost.
It is much bigger. The scope has absolutely exploded compared to the first version. The sources we looked at, they break it down into two main tiers.
Two tiers, okay.
First, you've got the essential entities. These are kind of the ones you'd expect, the really critical sectors.
Right.
Energy, transport, health, water, providers of core digital infrastructure.
Right. The big utilities and networks.
Exactly. And crucially, this tier explicitly includes large MSPs because of their, privileged access and role within these critical sectors.
Okay, large MSPs are essential. What about the second tier? The one that probably catches a lot more businesses? The mid-market, maybe?
That's the important entities tier. And yeah, this definitely broadens things out. It includes manufacturing, food processing, postal services, and significantly for our listeners, medium-sized digital service providers.
Ah, so medium-sized MSPs fall under important.
Potentially, yes. The really critical point here, though, is the focus on the digital supply chain. MSPs aren't just seen as external IT vendors anymore.
Okay.
They're explicitly recognized as fundamental parts of that supply chain, which means their internal security, their own risk processes, how they handle and report incidents.
Yeah.
All of that is now directly auditable by the regulators.
Wow, okay. That immediately elevates the conversation, doesn't it? From just providing a service to being part of the regulated infrastructure. So that brings us to the high stakes part, the accountability. What are the key changes that really dial up the urgency here, beyond just covering more sectors?
Well, the massive shift is really in enforcement and governance. We're seeing basically four main areas that have a huge impact. First, there's the financial hammer.
The fines.
The fines. They can now reach up to 10 million or 2% of global turnover.
2% of global turnover.
Whichever is higher. So yeah, that's a serious, serious threat to the balance sheet.
Okay, that definitely gets attention.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a second point earlier, the personal accountability one. That feels like it truly changes the game in the boardroom.
It absolutely does. That's the second major change. Senior management can be held personally liable for noncompliance.
Personally liable.
Yes, which means cybersecurity suddenly, it's not just an IT issue you can delegate down the chain. It becomes a fiduciary duty, a matter of governance at the highest level.
Wow.
A lack of proper oversight, documented processes, it can now directly impact an executive's career, maybe even their personal finances.
So how does an MSP translate that personal risk for the CEO? How do they turn that into a conversation about needing, say, an upgraded service package? Especially with a client who maybe thought IT security was just about having a firewall.
Well, it completely reframes the conversation, right? It shifts it away from IT being just a cost center.
Yeah.
Now it's about personal risk mitigation for the execs. The MSP isn't just selling antivirus software anymore. They're selling essentially a governance framework, something that helps protect the executives from that personal liability.
Ah, okay. So it forces the client's hand, in a way.
It forces them to adopt more structured security practices, things like having documented policies, clear procedures, maybe even reporting to the board on security posture, just to meet their basic legal duty of care under NIS2.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk operational pressure then. What about that mandatory reporting requirement you mentioned? That sounds demanding.
It is. That's the third, actually, let's call it the fourth big change if we count the broader scope. Major incidents. They have to be reported to the relevant national authority within an incredibly tight window. 24 hours of becoming aware of it.
24 hours, that's fast.
Extremely fast. And importantly, that's not 24 hours to fix the problem. It's 24 hours just to get the initial report in, the initial assessment.
Wow. Okay.
This basically mandates a whole new level of internal maturity around incident response. You need the processes, the documentation, the technical visibility to even know what happened, assess it, and report it that quickly.
Now, if you put all that together, the
Yeah.
broader scope, the huge fines, the personal liability, the 24-hour reporting, what's the synthesis for MSPs and their clients?
It means cybersecurity, especially for those clients now in scope. It's moved way beyond best effort service delivery. It's now about provable, auditable governance. It's about having repeatable, swift processes. Clients will demand evidence. Regulators will demand evidence.
Okay, the fear factor is definitely clear. Personal liability, massive fines, tight deadlines. Understood. Now, let's pivot. Let's talk about the counter strategy. How do proactive MSPs actually turn all that client anxiety, that regulatory burden, into a structured opportunity for revenue? Because usually regulation just feels like a cost, a drain.
Right, and that's the key insight. The market opportunity is huge precisely because of that fear factor, because of the pressure.
Also,
Think about it. You have all these SMBs, these mid-market companies, suddenly finding themselves classed as important entities. They're getting hit with demands from auditors, maybe they're cyber insurers, regulators. They all need proof that these companies meet the minimum NIS2 standards.
and they probably can't do it themselves.
Exactly. Most don't have the internal expertise or resources. So they're turning to their providers, their MSPs, and they're asking questions like, how do we actually show evidence of managing risk? Or can you help us meet that crazy 24-hour reporting deadline if something happens?
Ah, okay. So the MSPs who get their act together early on in IS2, they become the indispensable solution to that client anxiety.
Precisely. They become the go-to partner.
So how do they, calculate the ROI for the client? Justify what might be a premium price for these new compliance-ready services, especially when you compare it against those potentially massive fines.
Well, it's almost like risk arbitrage, isn't it? The MSP is essentially selling assurance. Assurance against a potential 2% global turnover fine. And assurance that helps protect the executives' careers.
Right. Framing it as insurance.
You justify the premium by demonstrating clear, measurable, visible security outcomes. Not just ticking boxes or showing activity, but showing actual results. Risk reduction they can see.
Okay.
This allows MSPs to package and offer these premium compliance-focused security bundles, which naturally significantly boosts their average revenue per user, their ARPU.
So they stop competing just on basic IT support price.
Exactly. They move up the value chain. They start competing on governance, on demonstrable risk reduction, on trust. It shifts them from being just a vendor to being a genuine, accountable partner in the client's eyes.
That focus on measurable security outcomes seems really key here. The source material we looked at, it mentioned this shift away from static, maybe annual compliance checks, the old spreadsheet nightmare, towards reporting on continuous security improvement. That's the real differentiator.
Absolutely. NIS2 isn't a one-and-done audit. It demands visible, ongoing security maturity, ongoing progress.
Okay.
So an MSP needs the tools and processes to automatically compile that evidence. Things like tracking threat detections, showing vulnerability remediation rates over time, proving policy compliance metrics are improving.
Right. Not just snapshots, but trends.
Exactly. The ability to sit down with a client, pull up a live dashboard and say, look, last quarter, your overall security posture improved by, say, 12% based on these metrics. That's the golden ticket.
And the sources mentioned specific tools for that.
Yeah, tools that provide that kind of audit-ready reporting are vital. The source mentioned enhanced.io as an example, something that helps automate compiling that proof of progress. making it easy to show regulators, auditors, or just the client themselves that things are moving in the right direction. That's really the cornerstone of building trust under NIS2.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It brings us really neatly to the practical side, implementation. Because getting ready for this, it sounds like it requires significant investment, right? In technology, maybe things like XDR, but also in expertise. How does an MSP realistically absorb that upfront cost?
Yeah.
And then how do they accurately pass that cost on to clients who might be, let's be honest, reluctant to pay more for governance they don't fully grasp yet?
Yeah, that's the core tension, isn't it? How to fund it and how to sell it.
Right.
The way to overcome that client resistance, I think, is by consistently packaging the investment as mandated governance, not just optional IT extras. It's required now. And that leads into the implementation roadmap. We need to structure this practically. Let's think about it in terms of the key domains NIS2 actually requires action on, starting with probably the heaviest lift, governance.
Governance first. Makes sense.
So, step 1. Focus on establishing clear, structured security governance. NIS2 demands evidence that security isn't just happening somewhere in the IT department. It needs to be managed at a senior decision-making level.
Okay, but for an MSP dealing with maybe hundreds of smaller clients, SMBs, creating that kind of structured oversight for each one sounds, well, almost impossible.
It can feel that way, and this is where a model mentioned in the sources becomes really critical. It's the fractional security director model.
Fractional security director. Can you elaborate on that quickly? What does that mean in practice?
Certainly. So instead of each small client trying to hire a, hugely expensive full-time chief security officer, or the MSP trying to be that for everyone informally, the fractional model provides that structured senior-level oversight, that essential board-level accountability viewpoint, but on a shared part-time basis. Maybe the MSP offers this as a service layer.
Oh, okay.
It clearly defines who owns the security policies for that client, who signs off on procedures, who can certify compliance efforts. It gives you precisely the kind of documented senior oversight evidence that regulators are looking for.
Okay, that makes the governance piece feel much more manageable for the MSP and the client. What's the next big operational hurdle, especially thinking about that 24-hour reporting deadline we keep coming back to?
Right. That points directly to step 2, implementing continuous monitoring and detection. And crucially, this needs to be done across the entire client base.
Not just siloed per client.
No, it can't be reactive or siloed anymore. You absolutely must have continuous, ideally cross-client visibility to spot trends and threats early.
And technology plays a role here.
A huge role. The sources we reviewed really highlight that OpenXDR capabilities, extended detection and response, are becoming essential.
Okay, OpenXDR specifically. Why open? What's the significance there?
Well, the open part is key because NIS2 is so focused on securing the entire supply chain.
Right.
OpenXDR allows the MSP to pull in data and alerts from various security tools the client might already have across different environments, endpoint, network, cloud, email, whatever. It aggregates all those alerts.
Okay, so better visibility?
Better visibility, yes, but also the ability to maintain those deep aggregated logs you need for compliance reviews. And critically, it helps detect threats that might move laterally between systems or even clients much earlier.
So it's about proving the MSP isn't the weak link.
Exactly. It helps prove the MSP hasn't inadvertently introduced risk into the client's environment through their own tools or access. And it provides that measurable risk reduction evidence we talked about, showing proactive threat hunting across the whole portfolio.
Okay, let's challenge this a bit, though. That 24-hour reporting deadline, it still sounds incredibly difficult, almost impossible, for an MSP managing maybe hundreds of clients, possibly across different time zones. Are the sources suggesting this really is the biggest operational hurdle? And how do firms realistically gear up to meet that?
It probably is the biggest single operational hurdle, yes. And the answer isn't just technology. It's about rigorous internal process. That brings us to step 3. Define your incident reporting workflow meticulously.
A documented workflow.
Absolutely airtight. It has to cover things like who, specifically, is responsible for triaging and validating a potential major incident within the first few hours? How is the client immediately and formally notified according to the plan? What specific information needs to be recorded right away for that initial 24-hour report and then for the later, more detailed post-incident review?
It's pre-planned.
It has to be a documented, drilled, tested workflow. Compliance needs to be built into the response from minute 1, not bolted on afterwards as an afterthought.
That really shifts the MSP's role, doesn't it? From just being a technical responder to almost being like a certified reporting agent for the client.
It does, exactly. And having the ability, maybe through their platform, to instantly generate those audit-ready incident summaries we mentioned.
Yeah.
The report showing the timeline, the initial impact assessment, the immediate mitigation steps taken. Having that data readily available makes meeting that intense deadline dramatically simpler and more credible. Then there's step 4, address supply chain security directly. This is a kind of the regulatory elephant in the room for many service providers.
Meaning the MSP's own suppliers?
Yes. Under NIS2, an MSP needs to rigorously evaluate and critically document the security practices of their own key vendors, the software they use to deliver services, the cloud platforms they rely on, data centers, other partners.
So they have to vet their own tech stack.
Precisely. It's the only way they can credibly demonstrate to their clients and to auditors that the client's overall supply chain risk, which includes the MSP and their suppliers, is being actively managed. That's one of NIS2's core requirements.
Okay, and all this documentation, this vetting, it leads directly to the next step, which is proving the whole effort works, right?
Correct. Which is step 5. Prove compliance with consistent evidence and reporting. Like we said, auditors, regulators, they don't want static spreadsheets anymore. They expect ongoing proof that security controls are not just present, but actively working and effective.
So live data.
Live data, automated metrics, things like patch status across the client base, dashboards showing policy adherence, vulnerability management progress week over week. That visible shift, moving away from dusty documents towards live compliance dashboards, that's what dramatically differentiates a prepared MSP from a generic IT provider in the eyes of a regulated client. And that brings us to the final piece, which is more cultural. Step 6, build a culture of shared security responsibility.
Shared responsibility. How does that work when liability is personal for management?
Well, the ultimate accountability shifts to the top, yes. But making it all work day to day, successfully meeting these requirements, that relies on the whole team being bought in.
Okay.
So key actions here include regularly training all staff, not just techs, on security awareness and particularly their role in these new reporting obligations. It means actually testing those incident response plans, maybe quarterly, through tabletop exercises.
Practicing it.
And it means actively involving clients in regular security review meetings, using that data we talked about, to reinforce that security is a partnership, a shared responsibility.
Right. So we've walked through the roadmap. Governance, continuous monitoring, incident workflow, supply chain, evidence, and culture. Looking back at the source material, what did it identify as the biggest sort of practical stumbling blocks for MSPs trying to actually implement all this? Where did they get stuck?
The sources seem to point to 3 main challenges pretty consistently. First, just getting their heads around the regulatory language itself. Translating that dense legal text into specific, actionable processes they need to build.
Yeah, the translation piece.
Second, maintaining consistency. Providing that high-quality, continuous evidence reliably across potentially dozens or hundreds of clients, all with slightly different setups, that's a scale problem.
Right. Doing it once is hard, doing it everywhere is harder.
Exactly. And third, integrating and managing the necessary continuous monitoring tools without just drowning the team in alerts. Finding the signal in the noise.
Okay. And the solution to handling that scale and complexity.
Well, the underlying message seemed to be that centralizing things like compliance reporting and threat detection, using platforms that can aggregate and analyze data across clients, that's really the only scalable way forward. It lets MSPs focus their energy on strategic growth and client relationships instead of constantly chasing disparate paperwork and alerts.
That makes a lot of sense. Centralized to scale. Okay, to wrap this up then, let's give the listener that fast, actionable checklist you mentioned. Based on the sources, what are the immediate steps an MSP can take, maybe starting today or this week, to begin aligning with the spirit, if not the full letter, of NIS2?
Okay, yeah, let's do a quick rundown. The necessary fast list.
Get serious about it. Appoint a clear security lead, or actively look into implementing that fractional security director model right away. Someone needs to own this.
Okay, assign ownership.
Second, risk management. Start now. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, specifically mapping your current services against those key NIS2 domains we discussed. Where are the gaps?
Assess the gaps. Got it.
Third, monitoring. If you haven't already, prioritize deploying robust, continuous detection and response capabilities. Aim for visibility across all your client environments.
Deploy detection. Next.
Fourth, incident response. Don't wait for an incident. Drill down now. Define and document those workflows for the critical 24-hour reporting and internal escalation paths. Test them.
Define and test IR.
Fifth, supply chain. Start the vetting process. Review and formally document the security practices of your own key technology vendors and partners.
Vet your vendors.
Sixth, reporting. Move beyond quarterly or annual reports. Set up systems, automate where possible, to generate audit-ready compliance and security posture reports much more frequently, maybe weekly or monthly, showing trends.
Automate reporting.
And finally, number 7, training. Implement mandatory, regular awareness sessions for your own staff, and consider offering some for clients too, specifically focusing on these new NIS2 obligations and reporting duties.
Train everyone. That's a great practical checklist, thanks.
Yeah.
So the final takeaway here seems pretty clear. NIS2, it's not just more regulatory paperwork to file away. It's really an integrated framework for achieving better, more structured security.
Right. And when MSPs embrace it proactively, not reactively,
Right.
it fundamentally changes their competitive advantage. It becomes about turning that compliance burden into a predictable, potentially high-margin revenue stream.
Building trust through proof.
Exactly. If you connect this to the bigger picture, by getting ahead of NIS2, MSPs aren't just protecting their clients from fines. They're institutionalizing trust. They're proving a massive, quantifiable value, add risk reduction, governance support, in a way that basic IT support just never could. It elevates the whole relationship.
Okay, so here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. The true differentiator under NIS2, looking forward, is probably not just having security controls. Eventually, everyone will be forced to have those to some degree.
Right, it becomes table stakes.
The true differentiator, the thing that builds long-term value and stickiness, seems to be the ability to demonstrably prove measurable progress in security improvement over time. Think about how providing those visible, quantifiable security results fundamentally shifts your client's perception, their loyalty, their retention, that ability to show continuous betterment. That might just be the ultimate catalyst for high-value business growth in this new compliance-driven era.